In the shadow of the American justice system, behind the cold steel bars of death row, a countdown has already begun. The year is 2025, and for 10 individuals, it will be their last. Their crimes, dark, disturbing, and unforgettable, have sealed their fate, leading them to the ultimate punishment, execution. The death penalty has long been a battleground of moral, legal, and ethical debate. Is it justice or is it vengeance? 23 states have abolished it, yet in 27 others, including the federal and military system, it remains intact, reserved for the most heinous acts of violence. The U.S. Constitution's 8th Amendment ensures that capital punishment is neither cruel nor arbitrary, but its existence continues to stir controversy. Each of the names on this year's execution list carries a story. Some are chillingly remorseless. Others maintain their innocence. Some have spent decades awaiting their final day, exhausting every legal avenue. On average, it takes 13 years from sentencing to execution. 13 years of waiting. 13 years of appeals. 13 years of reflection or denial. From Oklahoma to Texas, Alabama to Florida, South Carolina to Ohio, the clock is ticking. And as we delve into these cases, we must ask what led them here, what crimes condemned them, and what final words will they leave behind. Tonight, we step inside the world of those who have been sentenced to die. This is their story. Without further ado, let's begin. Videos coming soon. 1. Maran Bowman Jr., South Carolina. On January 31, 2025, Maran Bowman Jr. will face the death penalty in South Carolina, one of the cases that time cannot erase. Bowman's case started in 2001 when he was just 20 years old. In an argument with 21-year-old Candy Louise Martin over a debt Bowman couldn't pay, his anger clouded his judgment, and he committed an unforgivable crime. After a tense argument, Bowman drew a gun and shot Candy multiple times, leaving her dead on the spot. However, his brutality didn't end there. To erase all traces of the murder, he set her body on fire in a calculated attempt to destroy any evidence. After the crime, the community was stunned and heartbroken by this inhumane act. Bowman was arrested and sentenced, but over the years, he continually appealed, insisting on his innocence and repeatedly calling for a reconsideration of his sentence. He claimed he didn't do it and that he was wrongfully convicted, but his efforts were rejected. Step by step, the evidence made it impossible for him to avoid the final punishment. And after more than 20 years, justice has been served. On that day, Candy's loved ones will witness a part of their healing, but the wound Bowman inflicted on them will never be replaced. The delay of justice cannot change the pain in Candy's family's hearts, but at least an end has been put to this case. 2. Stephen LaWayne Nelson, Texas. On February 5, 2025, Stephen LaWayne Nelson will be executed in Texas. His case is not just a simple robbery, but a cold-blooded and brutal murder. In March 2011, Nelson broke into the North Point Baptist Church, a peaceful place where people often go to seek solace and faith in life. However, for Nelson, it was just an easy place to commit his crime. He killed Reverend Clint Dobson, a respected pastor, while he was doing his duties, and severely injured Judy Elliott, a church member. After committing this crime, Nelson not only showed no remorse, but acted even more ruthlessly by stealing from the church. He thought that taking the property would help him escape, but he left clear evidence at the scene. The police quickly identified the perpetrator through physical evidence and witness testimony. When arrested, Nelson still claimed his innocence, but his excuses couldn't cover up the truth. He was sentenced to death, and all subsequent appeals were rejected. The entire church community and those affected by his crime could never forgive him. Nelson's actions not only took the life of a righteous man, but also shattered the community's trust in peace. On February 5, after more than a decade of legal battles, justice was finally served and peace returned to the survivors. 3. Demetrius, Terren, Frasier, Alabama. On February 6, 2025, Demetrius Terren Frasier will be executed in Alabama, bringing an end to a long, painful journey for the victims and their families. Frasier's crime shocked the entire community in 1991 when he broke into the home of Pauline Starks Brown, a gentle woman who never expected to become a victim of such brutality. Frasier killed her with unimaginable cruelty, and he didn't stop there. He also raped her. After committing this horrific act, Frasier went on to brutally murder a 14-year-old girl who witnessed the gruesome scene. Frasier's crime left deep scars on the victims' families and the community where they lived. For more than 2 decades, Frasier maintained his innocence and continuously demanded a retrial. He refused to accept the verdict and did everything he could to evade responsibility. But undeniable evidence and testimony rendered his appeals meaningless. After more than 20 years of waiting, justice was finally served on February 6, 2025, when Frasier paid the price for the crimes he committed. Though justice has been served, the wounds he left will forever haunt the victims and their families. 4. James Dennis Ford, Florida. On February 13, 2025, James Dennis Ford will face the death penalty in Florida, a well-deserved outcome for the crimes he committed. In 1997, Ford, then a 30-year-old man, invited Greg and Kimberly Mallory to go fishing, but his true intention was a brutal assassination. After killing Greg, he not only beat Kimberly, but also raped her in a state of horror. He then discarded their bodies and tried to erase all evidence. However, thanks to DNA evidence, the truth was revealed and Ford was arrested. Despite his appeals and continuous denials, the testimony from witnesses and the undeniable facts left no room for justice to be ignored. On the day of the execution, the victims' families will not be able to change the past, but at least they will find some comfort in the punishment he must face. The pain Ford caused will never fade, and the price he must pay for his brutal actions is irreplaceable. 5. Richard Lee Tabler, Texas. On February 13, 2025, Richard Lee Tabler will be executed in Texas, a tragic end to his unforgivable crimes. In 2004, Tabler carried out a brutal ambush in a remote area of Texas, killing 2 men, and then proceeding to kill 2 female employees at a strip club. His actions were not just simple crimes, but a series of calculated and violent murders. Although he admitted to all the crimes, his motive remains a mystery, knowing that justice has been served. While Tabler's death will not bring the lives lost back, at least it will be an end to the nightmares he caused. 6. David Leonard Wood, Texas. On March 13, 2025, David Leonard Wood will face the death penalty in Texas after a series of brutal murders. Over the years, Woods carried out a string of murders and rapes in El Paso, Texas, with at least 6 women falling victim to him. Despite his claims of innocence, the clear evidence and testimony from fellow inmates proved otherwise. The crimes Wood committed were not just murders, but some of the most despicable acts against his victims. No matter how many times Wood appealed, the truth remained unchanged. The victims' families will never get back what they lost, but the death sentence will at least bring a deserved punishment for him. Crimes he committed will always be an unhealable wound, a reminder that justice can never be concealed. 7. Wendell Arden Grom, Oklahoma. On March 20, 2025, Wendell Arden Grom will be executed in Oklahoma for the brutal crimes he committed in 2005. On a dark night, Grom and an accomplice broke into the home of Drew Kopp in Oklahoma, where they killed Drew and 2 children in a violent, unimaginable attack. The family members of the victims will never be able to find their loved ones again, and no words can soothe the grief they bear. After Grom was arrested, he could not escape the death sentence, as the evidence and his cruel actions made it clear that he had to pay the price. 8. Moises Sandoval, Mendoza, Texas. On April 23, 2025, Moises Sandoval Mendoza will be executed in Texas, a long-anticipated outcome for the crimes he committed. In 1994, when he was just 20 years old, Mendoza carried out a brutal and unforgivable act. He kidnapped a young woman, only 20 years old, and took her to a remote location where he strangled her to death. His actions were not only a murder, but a severe violation of human rights and the sanctity of human life. The evidence gathered from the crime scene, along with witness testimony, confirmed his crime. After causing the death of an innocent life, Mendoza thought he could escape punishment. However, with undeniable evidence, he was arrested and sentenced to death. The pain that the victim's family suffers can never be erased, but Mendoza's sentence will at least bring them some form of justice. While this execution will not bring the victim back to life, it will at least end the chain of criminal acts Mendoza committed. 9. Timothy Coleman, Ohio. On a cold January night in 1996, in a small town in Ohio, Timothy Coleman, a man not only convicted of drug trafficking, but also previously caught by the law, decided to take brutal revenge on someone he considered a betrayer. Melinda Stevens, a weak yet courageous woman, had acted as a confidential informant, helping the police apprehend Coleman in an undercover operation against drug dealers. Her actions placed Coleman in a difficult situation, and he could not forgive this betrayal. Revenge became his driving force, and that night in a restaurant, when Stevens had just stepped out with him, a plan was set in motion, a plan born from moments filled with hatred. As they stepped outside, Coleman did not hesitate. 2 shots to the back of her head, forceful and cold, left her no chance to survive. A sound rang out, and Melinda Stevens collapsed in her own blood, her soul pulled into the dark abyss, never to return. The police could only find the shell casings, undeniable evidence at the scene, but the weapon was gone. All that remained was the darkness, the traces of cruelty. After being arrested, Coleman confessed to his crime, as if everything had been in his hands. Coleman was convicted in March 1996 and sentenced to death, a sentence he will face on October 30, 2025. A tragic end to a life that had lost everything. 10. Kareem M. Jackson, Ohio. The name Kareem M. Jackson became a haunting presence for many families, Ohio. On March 25, 1997, Jackson and his gang meticulously planned a robbery. Their target was an apartment where they believed they could easily gain money and valuable possessions. However, the robbery did not go as they had hoped. When Jackson and his accomplices broke into the apartment of Antonio Hunter and Terrence Walker, a horrifying event unfolded. Both victims with fear in their eyes. Recognized Kareem M. Jackson, a man they never expected to be the one threatening their lives. For Jackson, leaving any witnesses was not an option. Those who had seen him had to die. Thus, Jackson ordered his accomplices to kill both of them. But it wasn't just a simple death. It was boundless cruelty. Jackson not only killed Antonio and Terrence, but he also beat and tortured an innocent woman during the robbery. She became the next victim of his irrational fury, her life hanging by a thread. Had to die. The police quickly gathered evidence, from witness testimonies to the criminal traces left by Jackson. Irrefutable evidence forced Jackson to take responsibility for the deaths of these innocent people. On December 10, 2025, Kareem M. Jackson will face the death penalty. The stories of these criminals serve as a powerful reminder of the strength of justice and the necessity to punish those who commit heinous acts. Their actions not only inflicted cruelty upon the victims, but also severely violated the respect for life and human rights. Each case is a painful story, a fear that society must confront. However, adherence to the law and protection of civil rights remain among the core values of any civilized society. Justice may not bring the victims back to life, but at least it will provide some comfort to those affected, knowing that these criminals will ultimately pay for their actions. Reflect on the valuable lessons from these stories, protecting fairness, respecting the right to life of each individual, and always remembering that no matter how clever the criminals may be, they will not escape the punishment of the law. Share your thoughts on these cases. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following other stories of justice, crime, and society's ongoing efforts to protect the truth.